Welcome to EPG Pathshala. In this module, we are going to discuss about OT and reduplication. We are going to discuss how OT with its constraint-based interaction approach accounts for the morphophonemic process of reduplication. In this module, I assume that you all are familiar with the concepts of OT. The OT approach to reduplication is, to a certain extent, a continuation of templatic theory in the sense that constraints may govern the prosodic size of a reduplicant. But it diverges from the templatic theory by decomposing templatic requirements into independent prosodic constraints and alignment constraints. The goal of optimality-based approaches to reduplication is to factor out the complex patterns of reduplications to constraint interactions. Like faithfulness constraints, we are going to take two types of faithfulness constraint here. One is the base reduplicant identity and the other one is the input-output identity. Reduplication, however, is not simply a system of copying. We'll see this later, that reduplication is not just about copying whatever there is in the base, but it also has different phonological aspects of it. Correspondence theory of reduplication is an attempt at explaining reduplication in OT. It claims that reduplication is the result of interaction of three types of constraints. One, which is faithfulness constraints, second, the markedness constraints, and third, the base and reduplicant identity constraints. McCarthy and Prince posited a basic model. Now, as you can see, the basic model has an input as affix, which is the reduplicant affix, plus the stem. Now you can see the vertical IO faithfulness constraints, the input-output faithfulness constraint that are vertical lines, and there is the output, and the BR identity constraints are acting horizontally. So basically what is happening, as we have already known, the input-output faithfulness constraints, they look about the identity between the input and the output or the base, whereas the BR identity constraints, they look at the identity between the reduplicant, which is the affix, the reduplicant affix, and the base. The reduplicant is not required to be identical to the root word. It can be a copy of more than one morpheme depending on the need of the language. Now, for example, we can say the Kinande noun reduplication. It's like ku gulu gulu and mutwe mutwe and muana muana. In the above example, the root words we can see in A is gulu, and in B it's twe, and in C it's ana. But as in A, you can see that ku gulu gulu, in that only the stem is getting reduplicated, whereas in B and C we can see both mutwe and muana are getting copied. That is, both the prefix is also getting copied. Not only the root word but also the prefix and other morphemes that are present are getting copied. So what is correspondence? McCarthy and Prince define this generalized notion of correspondence as follows. Like, correspondence is basically if you have two strings S1 and S2, the relationship of the elements of S1 to those of S2 are basically corresponding. So there is a relation R from the elements of S1 to those of S2, and that's called the correspondence relation. Correspondence are if both the strings are in relation to each other, they are bounded by a relation called R, then the elements of S1 and the elements of S2 would be called as correspondents. Now let us talk about the constraints, the reduplicant and base constraints and their forms and functions. The first one, the faithfulness constraint, as we all know, is the max constraint family. Now, since we are talking about we are talking about the input-output as well as the identity between the base and the reduplicants. So we'll have two constraints here. One, that is max BR, and second, that is max IO. Max suggests that there cannot be any deletion. So max BR says that if there is some segments in the stem, then it has to be copied or it cannot be deleted in the reduplicant. So basically it talks about a total reduplication, and max IO talks about if there is n number of segments in the input, then it has to have its corresponding elements in the output. So every segment of the input has a correspondent in the output. Now we have the depth constraint family. The depth constraint family talk about no epenthesis. Now you cannot epenthesize any segment. So now that talks about like two, again the BR and the IO family. Now BR is that no epenthesis in the reduplicant, like if there is something in the base, you cannot epenthesize in the reduplicant affix. And dep IO, which talks about no epenthesis in the output form, like every segment in the output must have a correspondent in the input. Similarly in BR, every segment in the reduplicant must have a correspondent in the base. Now we have the ident IO family. Now with respect to the feature F, now that again, if the reduplicants, if the base has certain correspondent with certain feature, then those feature must also be reduplicated or reflected in the reduplicant. Similarly in input output, if input has certain features, if the input corresponds to a certain feature F, then that has to be reflected in the output form. So let us now go into OT and reduplication. As we have already posited the constraints, we are now going to look forward towards OT, how OT would account for reduplication. Now completeness of mapping, like total reduplication. Now when we talk about total reduplication, what we are talking about is max BR and max IO playing role here. Now let's take about the example of Indonesian plural reduplication. Suppose we have wanita, which means women, and when we have woman, which wanita, and when we have women, it becomes wanita wanita, and when there is masarakat, and it becomes in society as masarakat masarakat. So that is what is happening, is total reduplication happening. There is no deletion happening there. Similarly, in partial reduplication, we take about nutka reduplication, whereas chimsi, and in the reduplicant has chichimsi and vaschi, waschil, and that becomes wawaschil. So basically what is happening is the consonant clusters are getting, in first one mersa are getting deleted, and second one the sa sound gets deleted. So partial reduplication, why it gets deleted? So basically the reduplicant is not taking any coda. So no coda, a Markowitz constraint is playing the role here. So partial reduplication is due to the avoidance of coda. So now we are again going to posit another Markowitz constraint, which is the no coda. Now no coda is dominating max BR. Because there is deletion going on in the reduplicant, we see that two sounds or one sound, the consonants are getting deleted in the reduplicant. But why is it getting deleted? Because the reduplicant does not allow a coda. So therefore no coda is a higher ranked constraint than max BR. Max BR says no deletion in the reduplicant. So for the nutka example, we have the constraint ranking as follows. Max IO talks about the input and output deletion in the base. So max IO, the no code followed by the no coda followed by the max BR. Now as you can see, the input is chimsi. Now we do not have any input for the reduplicant. There is no corresponding input for the reduplicant affix. So it's basically taking that output form for its form from the base or from the stem. So that's what we are seeing. In A, there is chi chimsi. So now max IO is not deleted. No coda is also not deleted, and max BR is getting deleted 4 times. And the second example, you can see that no coda is getting deleted as the reduplicant already has a coda there. So there are so many codas, so no coda is getting deleted, and max BR is also getting deleted. So now depending, as you can see about the violations there, so all of these like B, C, D, E have fatal violations of max IO and no coda. So now the optimal candidate is A, that incurs only less serious violations of max BR as it is the least ranked constraints. Now we are going to talk about 2 more constraints, which are anchoring and contiguity. Now these are also faithfulness constraints. Now what anchoring says is that if the sound is to the left peripheral element of the base, it has to be the left peripheral element in the reduplicant, and if it is the right peripheral element of the base, it has to be also the right peripheral element of the reduplicant. So the correspondence to the left edge and the right edge prevails. So correspondence preserves alignment in the following senses. Now what contiguity says is that every sound, if there is a contiguous string, you cannot break that string. So basically it does not allow for any kind of metathesis or any other alternation. So the portion of the base standing in correspondence forms a contiguous string, as does the correspondent portion of the reduplicant. So for example, like anchoring and contiguity are satisfied by various reduplications. Like we have examples from Diyadi, Kinande and so on. You can see in number 1, both the anchoring and the contiguity is maintained. Like gulu, gulu, lo, lo, and it's not like one sound is taken from here and another sound is taken from another place. Now let us talk about Sanskrit perfective reduplication. Now when we have words like leap and prop, we have kaskanda and tastamba. Now this time is skand. Now what we are seeing is that the sa gets deleted. In skand we only take ka, and in stamb we only take ta. So it becomes ka skanda and ta stamba. Now sa is getting deleted here. Similarly, in Sanskrit perfective reduplication, we have pa pratha, mamamna, saswar, dadhvans. Now what is happening here is, in pa pratha the ra is getting deleted, and in the second example the na is getting deleted. So basically they do not allow for complex onsets. Now what we can find is that the onsets are getting simplified. So consonant clusters there are getting deleted. So what is happening is the reduplicant seems to be simplifying the onset in reduplication. So now we are going to posit another markedness constraint, that is no complex onset. Now no complex onset in Sanskrit, basically no complex onset is the highest ranked constraint, followed by anchoring BR and contiguity BR. So anchoring BR and contiguity BR are unranked. So by getting that we can posit all these optimal candidates. So in the examples we know that the base does not undergo the simplification, although complex onsets are happening in the language, do exist in the language, but it is not persisting or not existing in the reduplicants. So basically this marked structure is there in the language, not that it is absent in the language. We do have the marked structure in the language, as skand, stamb, consonant clusters are allowed, but in the reduplicant these marked structures are not allowed. So we can find the emergence of the unmarked there, which points us to another. In the above examples we saw that the base does not undergo the simplification, so which points us to another faithfulness constraint of max IO. So deletion occurs only in the reduplicant and not the base. So base, the faithfulness constraint of in the base persists. So max IO is the most dominating constraint in the whole ranking. So now we have a final set of ranking, which is max IO, dominating no complex onset, dominating anchoring BR, contiguity BR, max BR, which are all unranked. In this module, we discussed how OT with its constraint interaction based approach can account for the process of reduplication. The interesting thing that we found in this module was that there were not one kind of faithfulness constraint, but there were two kinds of faithfulness constraint. One, that is the input-output faithfulness constraint, and the second, which was the base reduplicant identity constraints. Now the interesting thing to note here was that although the input-output faithfulness constraint, the output had something to be faithful to, in the base reduplicant constraint, the reduplicant did not have any input. So there was nothing to be faithful to. So it had to be faithful to its stem. Therefore, we had to posit another kind of constraint, which was the BR identity constraint or the base reduplicant identity constraints. Another interesting thing to note here was that the reduplicants are not just copies of the base. Although they take certain segments from the base, or they are relying on the base for their input, but they have certain characteristics of their own, certain phonological aspects of their own, which was interesting to look at. I hope this module was of great help to you. Thank you.